Thank you. It's nice. It's nicer to talk to faces than to names, but I realize that a lot of people are traveling. Um, I will be sharing a PowerPoint, but first of all, how is my, do I speak too fast or too slow for the translator? Okay, great. And and for those who are not listening with translation, do you understand my English? Okay, I see some head shaking. You're probably curious. This is a South African accent. Although I'm told by my relatives in South Africa that I'm losing my accent, but yeah, well, I can't judge that. So good. Well, I'm really excited. I really enjoy speaking about Ellen White uh, because up until 2023, I was working for, what was it, 11 years as an associate director at the Ellen G. White Estate in Silver Spring in Maryland. In the end of 23, my husband and I moved to Germany to help with my mother-in-law, who's getting a little older. And we work for the Hansa conference now. But my first love is always Ellen White, and I work with church growth, but I find her very contemporary for church growth as well. And my favoriteest thing is to do Ellen White seminars. So I don't want to do a long seminar with all of you. I'm sure you've all had a long and tiring day. I was asked to speak a little bit about Ellen White as a wife, mother, grandmother. So I thought we'd just take a little look into the family album and show a couple of pictures and tell some stories. I'm just sharing. Can you see my screen? All right, so there we go. So you will notice as we look at our pictures in our family album that the album begins already with a very mature Ellen White. This picture, of course, is colorized because yeah, photography was not that well advanced. And the first pictures of her, she was close on 20. Photography, of course, had been around for a little bit before, but photographs were extremely expensive to make. So it was, especially in the beginning years, we have very few photos of Ellen. And then later on, as photography got cheaper, we have some more pictures. So here we have Ellen. I think it's a good picture. You can probably look at her face. Maybe you can see, I don't know how good the resolution is, but you could see, let's see if you can see my mouse, right? On here. You can see here by Ellen, if you look carefully, you'll see that her nose is a little bit skew. And when you look very carefully, you'll see there's a scar running from under her nose to her lip over here. And this, of course, is what's left of the accident that she had when she was 9 years old, which I'm sure you've all heard about. Ellen was one of a twin. She had a twin sister, Elizabeth. And yes, as you can see, they were not identical twins, but they were twins and they were close. They were born to the Harmon family. They were the last of 8 children. So it was a big, big family. Growing up very normal with children, as children grow up, nothing extra special until, of course, the accident. What happened was, as 9-year-old Ellen, we don't know why, but there was another bigger student at the school who was somehow angry with the younger girls and was threatening them. And so Ellen and her sister and another schoolmate decided to run away from this big girl that was getting violent. And as they were running away, Ellen turned around to look and see where the big girl was. And at that moment, she threw a large rock, and it hit Ellen in the face and broke her nose and caused tremendous scarring, broke several bones in her face. Ellen was, of course, unconscious. The two other little girls, her sister and the schoolmate, helped carry her home, where she was in and out of consciousness for 3 weeks. Her father was away at the time, but the mother, of course, summoned doctors. I guess they would have done reconstructive surgery or whatever today, but there was nothing to be done this time. This is in the 1830s. Ellen was born in November of 1827. So she was just a little girl. And the doctors told her her parents to prepare for the worst. Well, to her mother to prepare for the worst. They didn't think that she would recover. One of the memories that Ellen has, because she was in and out of consciousness, one of the memories she has of this time was hearing the neighbor speak to her mother. And the neighbor was probably trying to be comforting and said to her mother, "Well, please don't worry. I have a lovely little white dress that you can bury Ellen in. So you don't have to worry about a funeral dress for her." And this, even though Ellen was in and out of consciousness, this really startled her, and she thought, "I'm going to die." And it scared her because she'd never really thought about dying before. I mean, what child does think about dying? And she realized that she was probably not going to heaven when she died, because she had been naughty, like children are. She'd been disobedient, the things that children normally are. And this hit her with a big shock. At this time, church was a very serious thing. Everyone, just about everyone, went to church. It was a cultural thing as well. Everyone went to church on Sunday. Her parents took her to the Methodist church. And they, even small children, they were very used to hearing fire and brimstone sermons about hell and about how people burn forever. And if you're bad, this is what happens to you. And so for little Ellen, this really brought up some pretty scary ideas. She didn't die. She did recover. She made a slow recovery. And it really damaged her health because she was pretty sickly. She wasn't her robust self when she, after many months, she was thin and, of course, had the scarring in her face. Fortunately, of course, she got the scarring while she was still very young. So with growth, it helped that her face didn't retain as much scarring as it would have if she were older. But she did notice when she went back to school that the children treated her differently. That looks are important to children, and she was a sensitive person, and this was quite a shock for the young Ellen. She hadn't forgotten the fear of dying and landing in hell. And she spent many sleepless nights thinking about how she could get saved, how this could be avoided. Eventually, she confided in her mother, and her mother tried to comfort her and took her to see a young minister who spoke to her. Ellen says that in that 1 hour that she spoke with this young minister, she learned more about God than she had learned in all the sermons and other religious talks that she had had in her life up until this point. And this man emphasized God's love and what Jesus had done And this really impressed the young Ellen, and she gave Jesus her heart. With her, together with her, her twin sister, they began getting ready for being taken up into church membership. It's quite a lengthy process in the Methodist Church. Um, Interestingly enough, Ellen decided, which already gives some inclination, she was now reading her Bible and having a personal relationship with God. She'd given him her heart, wanted to follow him, become a church member. And she said to her pastor that she would like to be baptized. The Methodists don't normally baptize, but he said, if that's what you want, we can do it. He was very open. And so Ellen, together with another candidate, was taken to the seashore, and they baptized there because, of course, there was no baptistry. In the meantime, something pretty exciting was happening in the whole religious world, which I know you all know about. So I won't talk too much about William Miller. And William Miller was going from town to town, preaching about prophecy and about the soon return of Jesus. So this was very exciting. He came and preached at the church that Ellen and her family attended. And they, after careful study, also became Millerites, as they were known, and looked forward to Jesus coming in 1844, as the Methodists believed. For Ellen, this was more than a theology thing. I think for everyone who really believed that Jesus was coming, this was really heart work. They were excited. There was no gloom and doom or fear. I find that interesting because I think for a lot of Adventists contemporary, when we think of end times, we filled with fear and terror. But people before this coming of, as they were preparing for Jesus coming, there was a lot of excitement and deep sense of joy. Ellen herself had not had good health since her accident. She had to drop out of school because she couldn't stay on in school. She got terrific headaches, and her hand shook so badly when she tried to write. The teachers advised her parents to take her out of school because the stress they felt would be even more damaging for her health. So Ellen only had 3 years of formal education. Yes, and unfortunately, this was by 1844, the 16-year-old Ellen was very sick with tuberculosis. And so she was really looking forward to Jesus coming and getting a new body as well. And of course, being with all the others saved from all times. Yeah, that was a little bit of her childhood, told very briefly. Just maybe a personal touch. Ellen she and Elizabeth were close as children, and they, of course, had nicknames that the family used. Elizabeth was called Lizzie, and Ellen was known as Ella to her family. So Lizzie and Ella, I think that sets a slightly different tone. I don't know how you feel, but I'm hoping that you are not influenced by all the black and white photographs. And I hope you don't think that people were black and white and boring, because they weren't. It's just that was, of course, photography. You might want to ask, well, why didn't people smile? If you know anything about early photography, exposure times were very long. And people had to sit very still without blinking for several minutes when a photograph was taken. If they moved even slightly, blinking, any slight movement, it would spoil the photograph. It would be blurry. They couldn't stop people from blinking, so the photographers eventually found a way to do some Photoshop on the first photographs. They'd actually cut out the eyes, where the eyes are, and they would paint in the eyeballs, because they couldn't stop people from blinking the whole time. But otherwise, they tried to get them to sit very still. They would often strap them into position, so they would actually be tied to the chair. So that's why they often probably looked uncomfortable in the photographs as well. So that's just a little background to why everyone looked so incredibly serious in the early pictures. Of course, this year, Ellen and Elizabeth are probably in their late 30s, early 40s when this was taken. So we don't have any younger pictures of them. This is probably one of the youngest pictures we have of Ellen. And this would be just after her marriage to James. Maybe I should backtrack slightly and talk a little bit about the great disappointment when Jesus didn't come on October 22, 1844. The group, those that were waiting for Jesus to come, were extremely disappointed. Please don't think that it was just a handful of people. All over the United States, there were thousands that were waiting. If you look back and you look into history and you go to any little tiny town in the US and you look into their old newspapers from 1844, you will find articles about the Millerites and about Jesus' second coming. It really was big. Here in Europe, in the Scandinavian countries, this was being preached as well, although the time frame wasn't quite as limited. It was more general. They didn't have a day like the Millerites had gone down to October 22. This was a more general time period. Yes, after Jesus didn't come, it actually caused waves in society. We had, for the first time, a rise in atheism in the United States. There were many people who said, well, the Bible can't be trusted then. Must be a book of fairy tales. Many more people, there weren't that many that went back to their old churches, but there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of movement. There were some people, a small group, a remnant, as they called themselves, the little flock, that still said, we believe we got the date right, but we don't know why Jesus didn't come, but we will cling to Jesus this time. And remember, Ellen's birthday is in November. This happened in October. 16-year-old Ellen turned 17 in November, and by this time she was so ill that she couldn't lie down. She was coughing up blood. Her mother was nursing her, and a friend said, bring Ellen to me, I'll nurse her a little bit, and you can get some rest, to Ellen's mom. So Ellen was actually brought down in a wheelchair to her friend's house. And while there, the 17-year-old Ellen, in early December of 1844, had her first vision. This would be the beginning of probably about 2,000 prophetic dreams and visions that Ellen would have. Some of them were just a matter of a few minutes. Others lasted hours. Probably one of the longest was a 4-hour vision that Ellen had. That was normally, this normally happened in public and had people there that were attesting. Well, but I better watch my time. What's my time? Okay, we want to talk about the children and the family, right? I better not get too carried away on the vision part, but that's exciting stuff to talk about. What were visions like? What did she look like when she was in vision, etc., etc. But I guess we'll have to keep that one. She was told, the young Ellen was told, that she needed to visit these small groups of Millerite leftovers, or what we call now Advent believers and encourage them after this first vision. And so she did, together with her sister. After the first vision, her health improved, and she was able to travel. She had to be very aware of societal conventions. Young ladies didn't travel without male supervision of a family member or a husband. And so she traveled with her older sister, Sarah, and a certain young pastor, Millerite pastor, James White, often drove the cart for them, or the carriage for them, the sled for them on these trips, even though they tried to really be very open about this, very correct about it. Rumors soon started spreading that this young girl was, traveling around in an inappropriate way with a young man. Ellen's mother was horrified, called her home and said, Ellen, you can't do any more traveling. Her father was quite sickly and couldn't accompany her. You can't be traveling around anymore. And she said, but that's what I was told to do. How are we going to do this? And she apparently, Ellen had a lot of respect for this young man, but had never thought of him as anything more. James was the one who really liked this young lady. And we don't know too much about their romance, but we do know that within a few months they had become engaged and they were married. They, of course, couldn't get married in church because Advent believers didn't have a church. They had to get married before the justice of peace. But it must have been quite something, especially for James, because he had written just a year before in one of the Advent publications, he had written a very strong statement because there was another Millerite couple who wanted to get married. And he said, absolutely not. We're living in end times. This is not a good idea to be getting married. This is bad news. And now he was getting married, and so it must have, he had to eat his own words there. But Ellen and James were quite the couple. They were very different in their personalities. James was a type A personality. He had energy for several men. He was full of good ideas, creative ideas. He was physically, he had been quite sick as a youth, but he was physically strong. He was quite a bit taller than Ellen. Ellen was short, so she could almost fit under his arm. He was much taller than Ellen. He was her senior by, I think, about five years. And Ellen, on the other hand, was extremely shy, especially as a young woman. She was extremely shy, more retiring in nature, more sensitive, more an observer. So they were very different characters, but they developed a deep love and commitment for each other. It's fascinating. In the White Estate, we have a whole lot of letters that they wrote to each other when they were apart, and you see a lot of tenderness between them. Things weren't always easy for the Whites as a family. Things were very difficult. Perhaps I'll speak a little bit more about the obstacles that they faced as a couple. Let me just say that they were not an ideal couple, if you could say that. They did not have the perfect family, because no such thing exists. We are all works in progress. And I've studied in particular the correspondence between Ellen and James and looked into their marriage. And at times it got pretty tough. It got pretty tough. Yeah. we'll speak just a touch more about it. Ellen here is pregnant with the first or the second child. We're not too sure on the dating of this particular picture. Here we have a much older Ellen White. We have her in her 50s, and I really like this picture because she looks kind of different. When we think of Ellen, we always think of her as being in black or brown or dark colors. Here she's in a vibrant green, and you might ask, well, this picture is obviously colorized, and I'd say yes, it is. Why on earth was it colorized green? And that's kind of exciting because the White Estate did some excellent detective work here, if I may say. We have access to all her diaries, and Ellen kept diaries. A little less in the beginning, but especially later on, she kept every day she wrote in her diary what she'd done, where she'd been, and these were important things she wrote in the diary, but also things like gone shopping, picked up a bargain here, or went to a sale there. And when she took this photograph, she wrote in her diary that she was going to have her picture taken. She put the date down. And then she wrote a note to one of her helpers asking them to please bring her green velvet dress because that's the one that she wanted to use for the photograph. So we knew it was green, but we wondered what shade of green it was. And we happened to know when the dress was made as well, because she said when the dress was made and where she'd bought the fabric. And so we were able to look up the catalog, the fabric catalog for that year. And this was the green that was on offer for the fabric. So that was the detective work to having her a green dress up there. But perhaps helping one think of Ellen White as not being in black and dark colors. In her later life, she was in dark colors once she became a widow in 1881, because in the Victorian era, the rules of mourning were very strict. When you lost your husband, you went into black for 1 year. And after 1 year, you could start wearing colors again. But if you wore bright colors, it was an indication that you were available again and that you were open to courting again and finding a new spouse, which Ellen wasn't. She did have a proposal afterwards, but she said no. James was the love of my life. And so after James's death, she stuck to the Victorian culture of wearing dark colors until the end of her life. So that's why we think of her in dark colors, but she wasn't always in dark colors. She was often in very bright colors. Their first son, Henry, we have here. And this is a picture of Henry when he was 16 years old. Henry, I think, was quite a good-looking lad, a very talented young boy, very musical, seemed to be very sensitive too, very musical. It was just before the American Civil War that he entered his teens, and in Battle Creek there was a lot of action going on, and there was lots of military maneuverings, and there was a military garrison. And even though the Seventh-day Adventists were very against war and against active participation, Henry was really drawn to all the excitement of the military. And probably at this time, Henry had already given his heart to Jesus earlier, but at this time, the excitement of everything else seemed to be pulling him quite a bit away. Very sadly, he was with some friends and he caught pneumonia and he died. He was only 16 years old when he died. This is the last photograph that we have of Henry. His parents were able to get to him before he died. The family he was staying with said when he got sick, they wanted to move him back to get to the sanitarium, but there wasn't enough time. It was a very, very quick pneumonia. But it was enough time for him to make right with Jesus and reaffirm his faith at this time. He then took the opportunity to dictate a little, it turned out to be a little booklet to all of his friends, his young friends back at Battle Creek, encouraging them to live for Jesus. That all the young hopes and dreams that a young man has, in all of that, one shouldn't forget the things of eternity, because it could come surprisingly. And this is what Henry spoke about. Of course, this was a real blow to his parents when he died. It's not easy losing a child. And this was the second child that they lost. So the oldest, here was Henry. And then their second son was Edson. Edson James White. What can I say about Edson? I don't know how much you've heard about Edson, but when researching, I discovered that Edson, maybe that's why we don't talk about him too much in most church circles, Edson was a problem child. Probably from the word go. He was very intelligent. He had a good mind. He was very quick, but he was also very impulsive, and he could be very deceitful. He already, as a young boy, would climb out of the window at night to go off with his friends on the town. His younger brother would sometimes see him climbing out the window, and then he would grab his younger brother and pull him out and take him with, so that he wouldn't be able to tell on him when he came back home. This young man cost his parents a lot of energy, a lot of worry, a lot of pain. He married young. His parents weren't against the girl. She was a nice girl, Emma, but parents said to him, "You're too young, you're too irresponsible, not a good idea." He just went ahead and married her anyway. I guess he resented being the son of a preacher and a prophet. But at some point, he decided that maybe this wasn't such a bad thing. One could actually use this to one's advantage. So he hit upon a scheme. He would go to a little village where there were some Advent believers, and he would announce that he was the son of Ellen and James. And of course, he got celebrity status when he said that. And everyone was, oh, whoa. And then he would say, well, I would like to do a mission project here, and I will need some money to begin the mission project. And of course, the church members, I mean, what do you think? The son of James and Ellen, of course, they supported him and lent him money for this mission project. More often than not, the mission project didn't go anywhere, and the next thing they knew, Edson had skipped town. And so what did they do? They wrote to Ellen and James and said, we want our money. Where's our money? And this, of course, was extremely embarrassing to Ellen and James White. We see a little bit of a difference in parenting between the two. James got to the point where he said, well, I think to the church members, I think you should report him to the police. He should learn to take consequences for the behavior he does. Ellen, on the other hand, was, well, maybe there was a misunderstanding. Let's bail him out this time. We'll pay for him, and let's speak to him again. Let's try and impress upon him what he's doing. Nothing seemed to work. In temperament, he was very much like his father. So they really knocked heads a lot. And there was a lot of tension and stress. This went on until James died in 1881. James died. And then Edson really seemed to throw aside all strain. And Edson said to Ellen, he wrote to his mom, who was then in Australia, and said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm religious anymore. I'm not interested." I find the letter that Ellen writes back one of the most touching that I have ever read. It's a personal letter that she writes to Edson. She wrote a lot to him, a lot to him. But she writes back to him and she says to him, "Edson, I have seen heaven. I'm not making this up. I've seen it. And there's nothing that can compare with heaven. It's worth everything. I mean, Edson, you don't know what you're giving up here. Please, Edson, it's not difficult to become a Christian. Edson, what will I do in heaven without my children? Please, Edson." And she pleads with him. Just how strained the relationship was, you notice by little things. You see across the envelope of one of the letters Ellen has written, and she's written to her daughter-in-law, to Emma, who she always had a good relationship with. And she says, "Emma, please see that Edson reads this letter and doesn't just burn it." So you can see her worry over there for Edson. This went on for years and years, this praying for her prodigal son. Finally, while in Australia, Ellen got a letter from Edson saying, "I've given my heart to Jesus." It wasn't difficult. I don't know why I've taken so long to do it. It just seemed to me that Jesus was just there with his arms open. And I said yes. And I am so grateful. The letter that comes back from Ellen is very happy, but you notice just a little bit in the tone, there's a little bit of guardedness. It's like, this is too good to be true. Is Edson up to something new here? Is this a different trick? Or is this for real? It was for real. But Edson was already 47 years old. So this was a long time of wrestling for this boy. As soon as Edson made serious with Jesus, he said, "I want to work for Jesus. What can I do?" And he employed all of those talents that he had and his fundraising and all the rest, his business sense that he had inherited from his father, collected the money to build this boat. This is the Morning Star, and it's quite a revolutionary boat. Here at the bottom, it was a big classroom, and here was a printing press on board, and this is where Edson, his wife, and the other staff members lived. And that's of the pilot house, and they sailed up and down the Mississippi. This was just after the Civil War. Well, it wasn't just after, it was a few years after the American Civil War. And the slaves, the blacks in the South, they were no better off than when they'd been slaves. And Ellen wrote repeatedly about the need to go and work there, to help people practically teach them to read and write and to be able to make a living. But no one wanted to go. I think people were, even Adventists, unfortunately, were rather racist and didn't particularly want to go down there. Plus, it was dangerous. The Ku Klux Klan were very active, and they used to, make people disappear that came to try and help. So this was a really genius idea. This was a classroom here at the bottom, and people used to come, and he would teach adults, print the books that they'd need, teach them here. This would serve as a chapel on Sabbath as well. And when things got too dangerous, he would tell the students, which were adult students for the most part, take your books, go home, practice, I'll be back. And he would just leave. And so at the same time, he was running over 23 schools along the Mississippi. And he really did a wonderful work for God. This is the third son. This is Willie White, William Clarence. And Willie, I think he would have been classed as hyperactive today. When you read him as a child, he was in everything. He was so energetic. He fell down a well. He got up to all sorts of escapades at school. Ellen had to, she struck on something. She had to let him get a lot of exercise because he couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. People would be quite surprised when she would arrive at church in her carriage on Sabbath morning and find that Willie has his jacket off, she's got his jacket, and he's run the whole way to church behind the carriage, because that way he could get a good run on Sabbath morning and get all of his energy out so that he'd be able to sit still for a little bit during the church service times. But Willie grew up. After his father's death in 1881, he became Ellen's right hand. A very talented church administrator in his own right. Willie was married twice. His first wife died, leaving him with 2 little girls. And Ellen took her 2 granddaughters, Mabel and Ella, into her home and of course, Willie was helping. He was a church administrator at that time, but really, as a grandmother, she had several years of being a mother as well for these young girls. Eventually, Willie remarried, and then he had several children, 4 more children, including twins, with his second wife. If you go to the White Estate, you will see there is a film in the Visitor Center. It's the only film that we have. One of Willie's sons bought a camera in the 1920s, and he actually filmed his father at his 70th birthday party. So you see a little man. Willie was short, like his mom, with a little white beard and a full head of white hair. And it's just the nicest film because he's running around with his grandchildren. At his 70th birthday, he's playing games and chasing his grandchildren around. It's just a really nice picture there. This is the youngest son. As you can see, there's no picture of little John Herbert because John Herbert died at the age of 12 weeks. He died in 1860. If you know any church history, 1860 was the time that we chose a name. And interestingly, poor little John Herbert died. I find it very touching that the oldest son, Henry, he died in 1863. And we spoke about it when he died. So he died 3 years later. He asked his parents to please make sure that he would be buried next to little John Herbert, because he said on the resurrection morning, he would like to be there to help his little brother. Somebody should be right there to help his little brother. Of course, he didn't know that the whole family would be resting and waiting for Jesus coming in the same plot. There's James. I guess he looks pretty old, but he's only 60 in this picture. And that's also the last picture of James, who died at the age of 60 in 1881. A man who did work, as I said, for several men. He really wore himself out. A little bit, maybe, almost time to end, but I'm just getting started with my stories. Ellen and James, I said there were no perfect marriages. uh, social scientists at the moment can predict quite well whether or not you will get divorced. They have certain key stress factors that they talk about. These include losing a child. If you lose a child, your chances of getting divorced go up because people mourn differently. The more children you lose, the bigger your chance. If you have financial difficulty, if you have major role changes, if you have ill health, of really major ill health, this is also all of these are signs of, or probabilities. Your probability of getting a divorce goes up. Interestingly enough, Ellen and James had all of these except for one. The only other thing that causes divorce is, of course, extramarital affairs. And James and Ellen never had that, but they had all the other stresses. James was often, he had at least 3 major strokes. And it took a long time and a lot of nursing to get him well in between these major strokes that he had. And he often today we know when people have strokes, they have personality changes and they can become very difficult. And James did after his sickness, and it took a long period of recuperation. And I found it very encouraging to actually hear Ellen's perplexity sometimes, her issues with James, with her children, and how she had to bring them to God. And just like you and I, she had to pray her way and ask for advice and ask for help through the difficult, stressful times in her marriage. I am supposed to end, so I'll just end by saying that Ellen had a great sense of humor. In case you didn't know that, she was not always serious. She didn't like people being silly or frivolous, but she liked a good laugh. And she laughed happily. She enjoyed smiling. She smiled a lot. Everybody that knew her said she was a very cheerful person. Of course, I can tell some stories about her sense of humor. Yeah, she had a good sense of humor. She loved beauty. She loved flowers. Favorite color was pink. She loved, her favorite vegetable was, she loved tomatoes, was one of the things she really enjoyed. And as a dessert, she really liked lemon pie. That was one of her favorite desserts. So just a few little personal things. Takeaway, a person that was not perfect, but was perfectly willing to be used by God. And God did use her in a mighty way. She faced all the problems and difficulties that we face in our partnerships, as mothers, as grandmothers, as wives, and yet, with God's grace, she managed to weather them. Some people say, "Oh, wow, but she wrote so much about child rearing and happy marriages and all this kind of thing." I'd say, yes, she did. It came from experience as well as guidance. And somehow for me, it has more authority when I read and say, yeah, this is someone who knows what she's talking about because she's experienced this as well. Well, thank you. That was just a flyby. I'm sorry I didn't get time to tell more stories, but I hope that gave you maybe a little bit of some insights into the family album. I'm not sure how you